what you think about them. The reason is because when you tell me specific things, I tend to like to include whatever people like in there. Now, what I've been hearing for the last couple weeks is that everybody likes the extra information that I'm giving everybody. I'm giving you extra information, so this week I kind of put a little bit more in it. So now my goal is not really to teach you Judges per se, because anybody can go back and read Judges. The goal for all my classes are to give you the information about all the external stuff around it, so that when you read it, you're going, hey, who's this guy? Hey, why do we call this guy? What's this guy? What are these guys? That is what I love to do for everybody. So please, I hope everybody's getting a lot out of it. And now let's begin. Let me pray. Father, thank you so much for this. I appreciate all that you do and all that you've given us. Father, you're the one we're truly seeking. You're the one who really is everything for us, because we need you in every part of our lives. Father, please help us to come closer to you, to take on more of you, to hunger and thirst for righteousness, hunger and thirst for you. Because, Father, you promise that you will fill us. And your word says that you will fill us with food that will never go away. Father, thank you so much. We just ask this in Jesus' name. If you notice my prayer, I actually just put a new paper out as of, now, because I just finished it last night. This is number 4 in the Beatitudes series, number 4. So this one is going to be, blessed are those with hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now, if you like history, I put a lot of historical people in it. I'm putting stuff like Augustine, I put John Chrysostom in it, and other guys in it. Plus, I liked using a lot of older style stuff. C.S. Lewis said, hey, after reading the stuff from the early church, why do I need to read new guys? Because those guys have a lot good stuff to say, and I agree with them. So that's what I do. All right, let's go into last week. Last week we talked about the sin cycle. And now the thing is, guys, this is something that is happening today. Everybody thinks that you can just change everything now. Oh, we got to change government. We got to do this. We've got to become a socialist. We've got to be communist. We've got to do this. But the problem is it's already been tried multiple times, and it's all failed. No matter what we do, and it doesn't matter whether even democracy, everything is going to fail because humans are involved. Everything is going to fail back then because humans were involved there too. Until we come to realize that it's a human problem that's causing all of our problem, and not just these guys or those guys, then we're going to really help to understand, that we need to look to the one who can solve the human problem, and that's Jesus. Now, last week we talked about this and how they're going to do. Now, this week we're starting into it, how they're going to turn away from God. Remember, we talked about that. Well, it was literally the next generation after Joshua turned away. And then we're going to find that many generations after that will come and come and come and come and go. So this is important to understand, because in all reality, this is something we deal with today. Again, everybody on the news and everything else wants to fix everything. Well, the problem is it's going to have to start being fixed per person, each one of us. Once each of us comes to know Jesus, once we begin to start living our lives for him, serving him and everything else, once we begin to let God do what he needs to in us in the church, then that's when things change. But until then, this is what we're going to continue to see in our lives. So we shouldn't be surprised that, 3 or 4 presidents down there, things are not going to change much. Well, because they didn't back here either. All right. Now, first I want to talk about the Ite brothers. Now, I always like to give kind of funny stuff on here. The Ite brothers. Now, I bet you, I'm waiting for someone to come up and say, John, I'm just wondering who these Ite brothers are. What these guys did. Well, the thing is, it's a joke. Now, the thing is, we have like the Amalekites, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Israelites. The difference between the Ite brothers and Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Persia, whatever, is that the Ite brothers comes from a single person. There was actually Moab was a guy. Actually, one of Lot's sons. Same with Ammon. Okay? Amalek was a guy. We see him in the early church. In the early part of Genesis and Exodus. Okay? These guys, Amorites, are more kind of a configuration of people. But we're going to even talk about the Ishmaelites today a little bit. So when you see the Ite brothers, they all directly come from a person who started everything. So whereas your Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Assyria, all those guys, they all come from a area, not just a person. So there you go. Now, so we got the Ite brothers, and that's what we're going to be talking about a lot of these guys today because we're going to meet some of them. All right, City of Palms. Let's talk about that. Now, we're going to be going into Moab. Moab is going to be our first aggressor. They're going to be the ones that actually goes after Israel. Okay, and that's when one of our first judges are going to pop up and take care of business. Okay, well, we had one last week, now we're doing another one this week. They're going to pop up, take care of business. But the City of Palms really is another name for Jericho. Now remember that? Walls fell down. It was a very, very, very big thing to the Israelites. Remember, Joshua pronounced a curse. Don't rebuild it. Why did they not want to rebuild it? Because they wanted to make sure that everybody continued throughout the ages to look at it and ask the question, why is it like this? And then we answer the question, because God made the walls fall down. Trust in him. That's the whole point. So if there's one place you're going to want to take over to cause a lot of psychological problems to the people, that would be this place. Okay? And that's why Moab went there first. Now, granted, it's pretty close to where Moab is, the country of Moab is, but that's why they went there. Now, but it's just like in the 1812 war, the number one place that the British went and burned down was Washington, D.C. And let me tell you, it caused a lot of problems. So the same exact thing is going on here. So the City of Palms is, now what's interesting is it's actually, as we're going down through the Jericho, this is not on the Jericho River. It's just a little ways up from it, and it's actually descending into the Dead Sea. But because for some reason there's a lot of springs that are feeding this, there's a lot of palm trees in here. So the City of Palms, and you can see why that Jericho probably hung out here. That's why they built the city. Okay, Moab. Now, this is what Moab looks like. Beyond there is the Dead Sea. And anybody know why I call it the Dead Sea? It goes nowhere. It's dead. It literally goes in, and there's nothing left. And what happens is it's actually the saltiest sea because it continually feeds stuff from the mountains and everything going down. It's here. There's nowhere to go. It's in this huge valley, and it's actually almost 1,000 feet below sea level. So it just kind of sits down there. So the Dead Sea, Moab actually sits right next to it. Now here's a map of Moab, just so you know that Reuben is really on top of that, which is one of the Israelites on top of that. Okay, Edom is below it. And remember, all of these guys, Edom, Moab, and Ammon, are all three relatives of Israel. Okay, Ammon and Moab, relatives of Lot by the incestuous marriage. Okay, Edom was Esau. Okay, and we're also going to look at one guy today that's Ishmael, which is from Abraham. But we'll do that in just a minute. So there's Moab right there, right next to the Dead Sea, right next to Reuben. All right, so let's talk about Ehud. This is Israel's first elite assassin, in a sense. That's what someone called it. And I thought that was an interesting way to think about it. But this guy actually killed this. Now, but here in a minute, what I'm going to do is once you understand the reasoning behind what they were doing to Israel, you can understand why he was a little bit violent. So let's talk, because we talked about that last week. There's a lot of violence in this, but there's usually reasons behind it. So, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Who did they go after? They did this evil. The Lord gave Elgon, king of Moab, power, and God gave Elgon, king of Moab, power over Israel. Who was Israel worshiping? Baal. Yeah, Baal. Just so you know, Baal will be the biggest problem that all of Israel will have up until just before the end of the 7th century. They're going to get rid of Baal worship. I mean, God even does this really big issue about Baal worship and getting rid of it. It will go away, but it'll take about 300 or 400 years to do. Actually, more than that, because this is 1400. It'll take about 700 years to get rid of it. Okay, and it's going to go away just before Israel goes into exile. That's how bad this gets. Baal was crazy, and everybody really loved him. So, all right. Getting the Ammonites, Amalekites, he got the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him. See, all those Ite brothers are back again, you know. All right, hey, let's go get Israelites. All right. So, Elgon came to attack Israel and took possession of the city of palms. Again, if you're going to do it, you're going to take possession of something, you're going to want to do that one because it's going to cause psychological problems. It really will, because now you've got the very place that Israel was very proud of. Hey, God did this for us. We're Israel. So it's interesting that this guy, the first thing they take is that. All right, so let's talk about the Ammonites. The Ammonites are actually the brother. Ammon is the brother of Moab under Lot. Now remember, when Lot was fleeing from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, his wife turned into salt, daughters had nobody. Lot said, oh, this isn't good, which means nobody's going to continue my Lot name. The name of Lot will continue forever. Oh, well, it really didn't. So Lot decided to take things into his own hands. Actually, it wasn't Lot who did it. Actually, his daughters did it. They actually got him, intoxicated, and then anyway, let's just say they got children out of it. You can figure the rest out. So the thing is, those two kids, Ammon and Moab, will then go up and do this. Now, God will protect those two, by the way. Before Israel even went into the land, God says specifically 3 people you can't touch. You can't touch Edom, that was Esau. You can't touch Ammon, and you can't touch Moab. Okay? Now, sadly, all 3 of those guys will end up going after Israel first, and then they're all fair game afterwards. So, but God said that because, now it's interesting, because of Abraham, God took care of people even almost 1,000 years later. It's just amazing how that is. Actually, not 1,000. It would be about 700 years later. So the Ammonites, Ammonites are basically, they sit right up, kind of up to the northeast of Moab. So Ammon would be Reuben, right about here, then Gad, Reuben, Ammon, Moab. Just like that. So, but that's who they are, and that's who they're also going to join in with them. Now, we're going to see that I threw this in here. This is a picture of David arrives to siege of Rabbah of the Ammonites. Just so you know, you got to remember all of these guys' names. That's why I keep bringing them up over and over and over, to remind you over and over. You got to know who Ammon is. You got to know who Moab is, because Israel is going to attack them, and they're going to attack Israel, and they're going to be part of the Old Testament spoken of hundreds of times. Okay? Maybe not Ammon hundreds of times, but they did. Now, what's interesting is that Moab actually, once everything's finished with all of this and Israel goes to exile and everything else, Moab kind of lived on. That was one place that actually did live on. So Alexander the Great didn't really take them out. So it's just an FYI. All right, the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites really are more from one guy, Ishmael. Now, I brought this up because this is kind of important to understand, and you'll see that this actually we deal with this issue today. We deal with this issue today because Ishmael was the son of Abraham under his, it was, what was his cook, or the lady that, one of the ladies that were living in the, one of the servants that were living in the house. She had relations with Abraham. They got Ishmael. God still blessed Ishmael, but they had to send them away. Where did Ishmael land up? He landed up, see where, now once you look at the next place, see Saudi Arabia there? That's where he ended up. Saudi Arabia is next to Jordan, which is next to Israel. So for the most part, Ishmael landed there. Now, I wanted you to also, just an FYI, look at the Mecca and Medina on there. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Two places where the two holiest cities of Islam. So what's interesting is when Muhammad went into there and he created Islam, he basically did it out of Ishmael. So Ishmael is really the basis of, just like Abraham is the basis for Judaism, Ishmael is that for Islam. And so Mecca and Medina was there, and I wanted to kind of make a big point of this because that's who really the Amalekites and the Ishmaelites are really kind of joined together in that area. Okay, and there's a lot of stuff in the Bible about them, but I just want you to know that we still dealing with them today. So what's sad to say, Abraham made a bad decision, which we deal with today, actually, as Christians. So anyway, all right. Okay, so, and I'm just doing this just to put a little contextually, the Sinai Peninsula, see, it's actually, you can see Egypt right there, in yellow. Sinai, that's kind of the little chunk that comes down there with the Red Sea. That's the Sinai. That is right there. So if you go north, you're going to hit right in Israel. So I just want you to understand this. This is another thing. I know it's kind of a lot of information, but one of the things when you're looking at these, it's kind of good to kind of know where you're looking at, because everything really is all about this small little area. And by the way, one more point, they don't call it the Middle East anymore. That's not the correct term. It's the Near East. So just an FYI. So if you hear it called, now I even do that sometimes. I sometimes call it the Near East. I sometimes call it the Middle East. The reason is it's not in the middle of anything. It's really nearer to Europe, Near East, and which means it's not the Far East, which is China, but I'm only telling you guys, so if you ever hear the word Near East, and I know you're laughing because you're going, yeah, it's so stupid. I agree, and it's all because of Europe. Thank you, Europe. You gotta love imperialism. Anyway, but the whole thing is the Near East. So they call this still the Near East, most of your people today. So FYI. Anyway. All right, I know I'm kind of pushing a lot of information at you. Okay, so let's talk about tribute. This is a very important thing because when you're dealing with an aggressor state like Moab, they are going to tell you they want something from you. I want tribute, they're going to say. Tribute was a form of payment, delivery of valuable goods, gold, silver, livestock, from a weaker state, tribute state, to a dominant empire. Now, granted, empire's not, for Moab, they're not an empire, but they were a dominant state. So they want stuff. Now, what I'm going to be doing in the next couple slides is giving you information based upon the Assyrians, because there's a lot more pictures and understanding of that. But it'll help you to understand what it really means when someone demands tribute. Now, I will say that if you go through the Bible, you're going to find that when Israel had to do tribute for a lot of these guys, they literally had to clean out their treasuries. Clean it out. They had to sell things. They took even they took, religious items. They took everything. It was, nowadays, even when the tribute, we would think of this like the mob going after these guys and say, well, you got to pay for protection and all this stuff. Yeah, they still leave you with a little bit because they got to keep you going, or else because they want more. But these guys would take a lot. And let's go into that. Okay, tribute to Assyria. I'm putting this in here because we have the most information about it, so I'm just using Assyria because Assyria really was pretty pretty evil and hardcore. So, heavy taxes, precious metals, resources, and vassal states is like Israel, such as the king of Judah, paid to the Neo-Assyrian Empire to avoid destruction. These payments, such as King Hezekiah's tribute of 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Now, guys, I'm about to give you the numbers in today's. 300 is like, oh, you only pay $300? That's nothing, man. I can afford that. Here, I can pay you right now. No, that's not it. Now, when they say 300 talents and 30 talents of gold, yeah, well, let me tell you how much it is. All right, 1 talent would have been amounted to 2,343 of these silver coins. 1 talent. So times 2,343 times 300, and I think you get the picture. It's a lot. Let's go into that. Now, by the way, that would actually be about 60 pounds. 1 talent is 60 pounds. These guys didn't just go there with a little bit of bowl of stuff and say, yeah, here's our talent. No, they had to go with horses, camels, loaded down with sacks of stuff to give to these guys yearly. Okay, so here's a little thing, economic worth. Now, forgive me if you are an economist. I'm not an economist, so I'm just kind of using some little bit of information, but this may not be completely perfect. But 300 talents is worth in today's terms, 300 talents is, now this is how much it would be worth by weight, meaning gold, an ounce of gold equals this. Now, it doesn't mean how much it's worth by GDP and everything else. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, talent of silver would be worth $20,280,000 by weight. They would have to give that every year. So you better get back to the mine. You better start looking for more. That's how bad it was. Now there's a point to all of this, so be patient with me. By economic value, 300 talents based upon basically the most domestic product of a country, which I looked at tons of countries and their gross domestic products and everything else, would be about $420 million. Okay, do you think these countries had that kind of money? Probably not, but that's what they demanded. So, looking at the area of everything, Israel, Palestine, 1947, and when they became a nation, their GDP was only 246 million instead of 420. So which means when Israel was first a nation in 1947, their GDP was less than what these guys were paying. Okay? Israel paid 420 yearly. This does not take into effect the food and other things stolen by the conquering countries, because not only would the conquering countries come in if you didn't pay their tribute, they're going to come in and burn your fields. They're going to come in and kill your livestock. They're going to come in and take your babies. Yeah. All right. Not paying tribute would be way worse than paying tribute. You better find it, because let me tell you, people like Assyria did. When a country stopped paying tribute to Assyrian Empire, responded with a brutal campaign. Assyria, renowned for advanced siege weaponry, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm just going to show you the pictures right here. Those are the guys that didn't pay their tribute on the poles. These are the guys that they're basically flaying on the ground. They're putting on the ground and tearing their skin off them. This has really happened. This is all from this stuff really happened. All right. So, with that in mind, we're going to see why this guy's violence, I don't blame the guy for what he did. Because they basically stole everything from you, and they took away your holy site, which is Jericho, and they kept you in this. No wonder they cried out to God. It wasn't that, oh, this really stinks, man. I guess we just got to deal with this. No, it's not that at all. This is why they cried out to God, because they did this kind of stuff. So, political assassinations. We're going to find that political assassinations really do change things. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's good. I threw a couple of these down here just for you history nuts. Of course, we got Julius Caesar, the Ides of March, and we also got Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Everybody knows that's what started World War I. And so political assassinations change things. So, what Ehud does next should not surprise you. Okay, and I also put this down so that all the people out there going, the Bible's terrible, they're just doing mean things to people, everything. No, this is the reason why. And trust me, when people go through warfare, yeah, it's not, I'm not saying it's good, I'm just saying that's what these guys do. And all right. So let's go back to that. Again, Israel did in the evil in the eyes of the Lord, and because of this, they gave King of Moab power over Israel, the Lord did, getting him to join Amalekites, all the brothers, to join him. Elon came and attacked Israel, took possession of the city of palms. The Israelites were subject to King of Moab for 18 years. Okay, so it took them 18 years before they started crying out to God. So it took a while, but they did it. They finally did. Okay, they were subject for this guy for 18 years. Again, Israel cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, son of Gera, the Benjaminite. And by the way, guys, it's a good idea to know all of your tribes, because in Judges, they're not going to come from one or two. They're going to come from people all over the place. So it's kind of good to know Benjamin. By the way, Benjamin is literally right above Judah, right below Ephraim. So, all right, the Israelites sent him to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, he had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long. By the way, it's about 18 inches. He strapped it to his right thigh under his clothing, presented the tribute to King Elbin, who was a very fat man. Okay, you're going to see here in a second that when he presented the tribute, he had a bunch of people with him. They got to get all the stuff to get, because they have to give quite a bit of their stuff to this guy. So after Ehud had presented tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. So the people and the horses and everything else to carry it. But reaching the stone image of Gilgal, basically that's just a little bit farther from the city of palms, he went back and said, "Your Majesty." Hey, wait a minute. So, but by the way, just so you know, just a little bit about how far everything is. Moab is here. See, do you see where top of Reuben, top of the Dead Sea? You go up to Gad. That's a little ways away. He was way over there, and turned around and went back to Moab, which is down in the middle here. So he walked a long way. What he was doing is creating a ruse. Hey, we're okay. We're just going home. We're good. We're cool, man. We'll see you next year, or whenever you want us to. Yeah, we'll be back. So what he's doing, he dropped everybody off. He himself went back. That's a long walk, by the way. That's a long walk. So he himself went back and said to them, "Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you." Now, to a king, a secret message, and he's going to say it's going to be from, let me see. Let me put it in just a second. He's a secret message. He's going to say, to a secret, they're going to actually look at a little bit of polytheism here. And this is one of the reasons why I always teach a small class on polytheism. All right. When you're dealing with secret messages, gods are deeply integrated in the world, frequently sending messages to mortals. So, of course, when the guy said, "I got a message from you," the king's like, "Really? Cool. I want to hear it." So it was a normal thing. So it's not like, but remember, this guy had to present it to him, so he was already in front of him, so the people are going to let him back in. Signs were read from nature, such as flight patterns of birds, weather phenomena, blah, blah, blah. Practices like reading animal entrails, casting lots, reading astrology, blah, 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 ways to determine God's advice. God frequently sent symbolic prophetic messages or direct visitations to sleepers. So, of course, these are things, so when he says, "I've got a secret message," most of the time, this was a very important thing to the king, because they want to find out, how are the gods going to bless me? How are the gods going to do this? It was a very important thing to do. So it's no wonder he was interested. Okay? King said to his attendants, leave us. And they left because he didn't want them to hear it. So you got to understand, this stuff is big business. So they would actually employ, later in the centuries, they would employ up to 2,000 people just to find out secret messages. This is how important this kind of stuff was, and why the king said, cool, come on up. Because it was so important to them back then. And so what a great way to get in to see the king. And so he's going to say, send these guys away, because the secret messages has to go just to the king from the gods. And by the way, then he approached him and said, I have a message from God for you. Now what's interesting, he didn't say Yahweh, which is their God. He said Elohim. Now, if you know anything about polytheism, anybody know who El was? Who was El? He was the original Canaanite god. Now, many people really believe that that was really God back in the day, that they just used him as El, Lord. El means Lord. So they believe that when God still had relationship to people, I'm not saying it's true or not, I'm just saying they believe that back then, before God revealed himself to Abraham, those guys, that was El. And so what they used Elohim, which is the Almighty. So the Almighty, he's not really saying which God for the most part, per se. He's saying, oh, the the Almighty has something for you. Now, it could have been their patron God, it could have been any God. So he did that. All right, so the king rose from his seat. And King rose because, I want to hear. This is important stuff. He was interested. Ehud reached his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Because the handle sank in after the blade, the bowels discharged. Now, I'm just going to tell you. Now, and I threw this on because, I used to teach anatomy physiology. And so most of the time when you see people, they're going, like this, and you don't see their bowels. Well, the reason is this guy was like this. And when it was a double-edged sword. So what he most likely did is went up and went like this. Now, the greater momentum right there, I'm just telling you so they understand what it means by why the bowels came out. The greater momentum is a big ligament that actually sits around the stomach. And basically, when you go up and it discharges, literally everything is just going to fall out. Because you've got all this stuff and all this fat pushing the bowels, it's going to come out. And that's what he did. This was very sharp. So literally, the guy's not going to live. You're not going to go from that. So, and even the handle sank in the blade and the bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed over it. Okay, now, why did they go into that much detail? It's because, think about it, they had to go use tribute. They were being tortured by these. It was awful what these guys did. And I'm going to tell you, I don't blame the guy for doing this. If I was under that situation, you have your treasuries have no money. They have to, and I'll tell you, do you know who the king goes after for money? First, he goes after the rich. Once they have no more money, he goes after the poor. Because if they don't, and everybody had to cough it up, because guess what? If they don't, bad things are going to happen. So again, the reason why I put this in here is because I want you to understand that this was personal. It also was a reality. I'm not saying what he did was right. I'm just saying, but the reality was he took care of business. Let's see how this assassination helped Israel. I hope this doesn't offend anybody by telling you this stuff, but anyway. Then Ehud went out to the porch, shut the door in the upper room behind him, and locked them. Hey, if the king wanted a message, he's going to stay there for a while, right? After he'd gone, the servants came and found the door open and locked. He must be relieving himself in the inner room of the palace, they waited to the point of embarrassment. Basically, now, and I'll tell you an interesting thing. If you remember, I don't know if you guys remember Joseph Stalin. When Joseph Stalin died, they were so afraid of this guy. He had a door locked. You don't open the door in Joseph Stalin. He died, and he laid there for over a day before they came and saw him. So that's how afraid these guys are of the king. So most likely, this took a while. But what it did is it gave Ehud his escape. He did a good job when he did it. So then they saw the Lord falling on the floor. Now, once Ehud goes, back to take out goes back, then he gets the rest of Israel to go with him. Said, hey, guess what? I just took the king out. And of course they're going, yeah, right, dude. You took the king out. No, I did take the king out. And so he rose him up. Now remember, back in these days, these guys were not really judges like we see today. They were really military leaders. And that's what he did. He rose them up. When he arrived, blew the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim. The Israelites went down with him in the hills, with him leading them. Follow me, the Lord said, and give Moab, your enemy, into your hands. So they followed him down, took possession of the fords in Jordan. They allowed one another to cross over. So basically, they took possession of all the escape routes, everything ready. God then gives Moab into Israel's hand. At that time, they went and struck down 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. They lost their leader, and they lost. So God did, and truly I believe God did what he did for a reason. He made it all happen. You're going to find that God makes it all happen every time. When you look to him, he will make it happen. Every single time. And I'll tell you, if you wanted to read where you're when you're going, even in Israel after the split, when we're looking into the kings of Israel in the northern part, where they're not even serving God anymore, but yet Elijah and Elisha is telling them what to do. God still takes care of business. Okay? Sometimes he does it very different, but yet every time it's going to be different, but it's always there. So, for that point, they had peace for 80 years. All right, now let's talk about something real quick. 80 years, they're like, 80 years? So we're now into the second guy, and we're already talking 100 years or so into this. John and I were talking last week. John came to, and he mentioned something, and I agree with him. He said, some of these numbers don't always add up. Okay? And so you look at it and you plot it out, and it's like, well, that doesn't quite. So let's talk about that for a minute. Now, I am in no way saying that the numbers in Israel are just plain wrong and God, it wasn't from God or anything else. I'm just saying that they see things a little bit differently than we do. So the Bible speaks of numbers in our 21st century. Our 21st century mind has a hard time making sense of it. 7 years, 40 years, 80 years. These numbers do not always add up for the most part. And also when they say, well, they wiped out wiped out all of them. Well, they never wipe out all of them, but from their perspective at that time, they thought they got them all. So they wiped them all out. Again, it's all their perspective of that time. Problem is, viewing methods, the methods that they were using in that period were really not the same things that we do today. We want everything concrete. We're taught scientific method. I mean, hey, I was in science, man. I understand everything I think of scientific method. Scientific method, and everything starts this way, and this has to add to this, and has to add this. If it doesn't, then it doesn't work. We have to throw it out. But these guys didn't quite really look at it that way. So, and these guys are kind of the problem. Now you're going, John, why is that Raphael painting doing up there? Actually, I own this painting. I love this painting. This right here is this is the school of Athens, the Greeks. One of the things that the Greeks did is they started off looking at logic, math, science, and they started all this. This came through, and by the 14th century, when they reintroduced it to us, we started this idea that everything we look at has to add up and be perfect and be proven. The problem is, these guys were hundreds of years after the Israelites. At that time, they're not really worried about exact numbers. Why should they be? Why should they be worried about that? I'm not saying that God didn't do the earth in 7 days. I'm not saying any of that. But the reality is, we've got to give them grace. If we find that there's little things here or there, they didn't care at that time. Why should they care? Because 80 years is, 80 years, sometimes they might have been just saying 40 and it might have been 38. And actually, if you look at when the Babylonian exile, it never run, Jeremiah said 70 years. It didn't really look, it was that's a hard thing. It didn't really quite make 70 years, 68, something like that. But the reality is, look, the point is they threw it, they said, this is about it. And we cannot hold them to the same things as us. So I'm always when I read this, for instance, they say that 3 million people came out of Egypt. Now, I did some math, and I thought, if you have 3 million people coming out of Egypt and they don't have the lines can't be that big because we have mountains we're going through, that would have taken them back over 100 miles. So most did they not? I don't know. All I'm saying is, let's give them grace. If we find that there's a little bit, maybe there's deviations, they left some here, people, they didn't take them all out. I'll tell you, I even read all of the other information from other places, from Assyria, from Babylon. I read all the different stuff written that day, and I'll tell you, the number one thing that everybody did was overestimate. Always. We killed hundreds of thousands and wiped them all out. Well, that's not really true. They didn't quite do that. But anyway, so just be patient with them. Please be patient with it. Understand that these guys, they're not looking for scientific methods and theories. So anyway, thank you very much for that little commercial. All right, now we're going to talk about one last guy, Shamgar and his ox goad. Okay, now this is an ox goad. So, and you're like, what the heck is an ox goad? All right, I know we're not shepherds. Anybody shepherds here? Any shepherds? You go out there with your sheep? Okay. So what happens is when you're going out with oxen and you have to kind of get them going, kind of push them. You got to get them kind of moving around and stuff like that. So you're going to use something that's a large stick to kind of push them, and you're going to have a point at the end to kind of give them a little bit of, kind of like what the guys use when they're on horses, spurs on horses, got to get things going. So that's an ox goad. Now, why do I telling you about an ox goad? Well, let's talk about the Philistines. We're almost done. Just a couple more slides. So the Philistines, everybody's favorite people, the Philistines, everybody hated. By the way, I would memorize the 5 cities. It will help your life immensely when you are dealing with the Old Testament. But the Philistines were the guys that everybody loves to hate. So in the Bible. Now, they're now the ones who came over and dealt with Israel. Now, I don't think that there was a lot of them, and I don't think this was a very big problem. I think it was more localized, but this is what happened. So Philistines came over, and Judges 31. After Ehud came, Shamgar, son, who struck down 600 Philistines with his ox goad, he too saved Israel. That's all we know. Not much more than that. So the thing is, if it's only 600, most likely this was a small thing to come over. He probably didn't walk into 600 people and start going crazy. He probably had other things, but that's what he did, and that's how he used. All right, so one last thing to go over. And I'm just going to leave you guys with this. We're going to start with Deborah. This is the last slide. Yes, last slide. Deborah was going to be a prophetess. So I want you to think about this. Deuteronomy 18:14, the nations you will dispossess, those who practice sorcery and divinations. But as for you, the Lord your God does not permit you to do that. You can't use sorcery or divination. Basically, that is, how do you find out stuff from God. God said, you got to do it my way. Seeing on the Bible is not as cut and dry. So what I want you to think about is that when she is a prophetess, God speaks to her. Why do you think that's important? You can even do some study of that, and that's it. So thank you very much. Is there any questions? Yes, sir.
Comment about the numbers that you have difficulty adding. There's a book that was written probably in the 50s called The Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings. Have you heard of it? Written by a guy named Edwin Thiel. He was a professor at college, I can't remember. And he shows how to reconcile those numbers because they were not using a uniform
Exactly.
time system like we have
Yep.
called the common error or AD.
AD or BC, right?
And he reconciles it, and the book may be hard to find because it's old, but it's been included in another book whose name I can't remember, something about has the word priest in it. But if you look up Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings, Edwin Thiel, you'll be on the right track. And you gain understanding and reconciliation of a lot of
Right.
it, probably all the numbers, but you'll gain understanding why it looks confusing
And it's true.
to us digital people.
Because we want everything perfect and set in stone, but the way they did it back then was just not quite like that. Any other question? Thank you so much. Any other questions? Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Okay, no more gross and disgusting stuff next week. None of that. Thank you, sir.